Hey, folks, welcome to Nrwl Live. We've got Aaron Frost here. We've got Brandon Roberts. We've got Sandra Elias. Everyone say hello.
Hey, guys.
Hello.
Hey.
All right, and today we're going to talk about a project that's near and dear to you folks, which is Scully. First, why don't you say a little bit about who you are? Everyone knows who Brandon is, so he doesn't need to introduce himself. Okay, well, Brandon, why don't you go ahead, Brandon, and introduce yourself? Okay.
I'm Brandon Roberts. I work at Nrwl. Also a court maintainer on the NGRX project, and happy to be here.
All right. I'm Jeff. I also work with Brandon at Nrwl. I don't work on anything interesting. I worked on some things back in the past, but now I work on emails. And then Frosty, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Aaron Frost. Everyone calls me Frosty. I've been buggering around in the Angular community for the last 7 or 8 years and having fun. Run a small company called Hero Devs, and we build a lot of cool software, and we have an open source project called Scully. So.
Hey, we'll get to Scully, okay?
All right,
we'll just wait a second. Okay.
My bad.
Let's wait. We're going to steal Sandra's thunder. All right, Sandra, go ahead before we get into the meat of it.
Okay, I'm Sander. I'm working for Aaron on Nrwl, guys, and I think the lead architect on Scully.
This is something we should establish on the air here. Who is the lead architect?
You heard it here first, I think.
Right, so we need to get Jorge on here and Andre and I don't know who else. And let's duke it out and talk about what it means to be a lead architect.
We're gonna drop two pool cue and break it in half, drop it on the floor, and whoever comes out on top.
There you go.
I like it.
All right, so
it sounds like a fair process.
It is. I'll moderate. I'm the host, so I think that is
any more coin flips seems like the actual democratic thing to do. It's coin flip somehow, but yeah.
Okay, yeah, and I think so. We're broadcasting with StreamYard. They probably have a coin flip feature on here somewhere that we can use to. But that'll be the end of the show. We'll work that out. First off, we've established who we are. Step 1. Step 2, what are we here to talk about? I really don't know. What did we say we were going to talk about? Scully?
We're here to talk about a problem facing most people.
Oh, nice. Marketing point of view.
Packs of wild dogs taking over most of the major populated cities in America.
That's problem 1. Problem 2 is...
Problem 2 is how do you statically generate your Angular sites?
Yes.
To get the performance out of it.
That's two biggest issues facing the world. And the far third after that is climate change. But let's focus on the first 2.
And we came to do the important things first.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right.
So, so we're here to talk about Scully. For years, people in the Angular community, I remember being at NGConf like 2 years ago with the 3 of you and hearing people be like, hey, man, Gatsby is cool. I wish we had something like that. And that would be cool if I could build my blog with Angular. And I think more than saying the word Gatsby, people were just saying, I wish I could build my blog in Angular. It's kind of what I was hearing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, we've been hearing this for years, and it just never happened, right? And
yes,
so
I've spoken those words myself. People just go out and build their own blog, and then tears appear.
Yeah,
it keeps going.
Yeah, and friends like Sam Julien and a lot of other people, with good reason, they were like, "Hey, I needed a serious blog. I want to do it in JavaScript." So they started moving to things like Gatsby, right? And it's because they had this need that Angular just couldn't fill. And so after kind of watching that for long enough, we reached out to the Angular team. We said, "Oi." They said "oi" because that's their accent that the Angular team has, right?
Yeah, Igor. Every time I talk to him, he's "Oi." Yeah.
And I'm like, "What's up?" And they're "Oi," and they're like, "Hey," I said, "Hey, is someone doing this that we could contribute, or do you need someone to do it?" And they said, "We need someone to do it because it's not a thing, but it needs to be a thing like yesterday." Mm-hmm. And I said, "Well, let's talk about it." So we kind of collaborated. We agreed on what it should and shouldn't be. It should be much easier than all the options that Angular people currently have today. It should be easier than anything that's out there. And Steven said, "Cool, do that." And I said, "Well, I don't have time to do that." But I mean, at least we know what it is. And he's like, "Well, we're going to help you out so you can focus on it." So we partnered with Google. Google helped us out so we could focus on it, and that's kind of where it came from. And I'm kind of putting words maybe into Sanders's mouth a little bit, but I feel confident that this is true. When we started building it, we didn't really know what we were doing. I mean, we didn't really understand the benefits of the thing that we were about to build. I think that's true. Like I certainly didn't understand the performance and the cost savings that we were about to provide people. In my mind, it was like, now you can write Angular stuff with Markdown. Like that was like the single feature we were really going to provide.
Mm-hmm.
But then you start to learn about Jamstack, and you start to consider, hey, look at all the features from Angular Universal.
What is Jamstack?
What is the Jamstack?
Mm-hmm. I mean, for our audience who may not.
Yeah, dude, the Jamstack. Does anyone else want to answer that? Because
is it a thing we've all just been saying and no one knows what it means?
no, I mean we do know what it means. It's Jam is JavaScript APIs and Markdown. So
Markdown or markup?
Markdown or markup. JavaScript APIs and markup. Let's say markup. Okay. And so that sounds like an Angular app to me. I don't know why Angular is not based on those three words. That sounds like React, Vue, and Angular are Jamstack, but they're not. It means more building stuff into a static fashion so that your app depends much less on the JavaScript stuff. So at least that's my take on it. It's making your app much, much smaller than what you can do with a SPA, right?
That's like, is that more for like initial startup? You want to render the thing, of course, without JavaScript, but then it kind of comes alive once the JavaScript loads, or?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't actually have to have any JavaScript load to be a Jamstack thing, technically. So, but yeah, I mean, it's tough to say. I will say this. I'll throw this out there. Our friends at Netlify, they have a really cool book because they kind of coined the term Jamstack, and they really kind of are pushing it. And they have a free book. I just put it into the YouTube comments, a link to their book. They partner with O'Reilly. What that really kind of dives into, hey, this is what the Jamstack is. These are all the benefits. This is how you do it. These are most of the questions people have, and these are some of the answers for them. So if you really want to like get academic around what is the definition, then I just posted that book in there for everybody.
Cool. All right. The authoritative source on what is a Jamstack is the book that Netlify put out with O'Reilly.
Yeah,
I'll accept that.
I mean that's what I'm going to say. They certainly are the ones that are kind of guiding us on it. Like they've given us a lot of help. They actually partner with us, and they gave us a lot of advice kind of day one. So Netlify's been helpful.
All right, so you talked about. Sorry, go ahead, Sander.
I think one of the important things of the Jamstack is you are less depending on your API servers. So you need less API servers and more static hosting.
Yeah.
Does that mean a lot of the generation is done at build time opposed to runtime?
Yeah.
All generation is done on build time.
Yeah. Not all, but most, right? Like
most.
So imagine a website that sells what's something that the four of us like? It sells donuts, okay? This website sells donuts. The pieces of the website that can be statically generated are like the list of all the donuts, the donut pages themselves, where you add the donut to your cart, right? And even most of the checkout page can be static, but there are pieces on the website that can't be generated. Like if you imagine the cart, it's sitting in the top right, and it has like a 1 or a 10 if you have 10 donuts in there, right?
Yeah.
And that 10 we can't statically generate that because every user is going to have a different version of their cart, right? That's called dynamic content.
I'll just generate every variation of a cart.
Yeah.
With the ordering of products, quantity of products.
Yeah. And
We
so
can do that, though.
you technically could do a lot of that.
If you have unlimited compute resources.
And if your CDN doesn't care how much space you use, right? Yeah. So those dynamic pieces can't be statically generated like the cart, but everything else on our donut website could be statically generated. And so when I deploy that to production to show the Boston cream, there's no APIs that have to get hit. So I don't actually have to deploy, my.
Is that your go-to flavor?
If I was going to do go-to, it'd be like a maple bar, probably.
Ugh.
Come on. Brandon, what's yours?
I'm a glazed guy, regular
Just a glazed donut with a
Yeah.
hole in the middle.
fresh out of the oven, glazed, and just eat it direct. There you go.
Is it weird that Brandon thinks that they go into an oven?
Oven, fryer.
Okay.
I just want donuts.
Brandon has controversial opinions about different styles of cooking.
Oh my God.
I'm not going to bring up barbecue now.
Are we doing this right now? Are we doing this right now?
Yeah, I mean, we should talk about barbecue just to troll Wes Grimes and Mike Ryan. But yeah, so barbecue is hot dogs, right? Hot dogs and burgers on a grill.
It's not barbecue unless it comes off a grill.
That's
and
right.
Charcoal is involved.
Yeah.
I'm going to stick to it.
No smokers,
No smokers, no pulled pork, no sauce. I don't want any of that stuff.
Yeah, you just want a backyard barbecue.
Get that stuff out of here.
There. All right, you heard it here. And yeah, in case you were going to ask my donuts, I actually like Boston cream. That's why I was excited when you brought it up. But it really depends on who's making it. Like different donut places have different strengths.
Totally.
But getting back on topic, because everyone hates it when we go off topic. That's all the critical comments I get after all these is all the joking. But
you guys went off topic. And I'm mad about
I took us there, so I take responsibility.
Where were we before we went off topic with the donut?
Where I wanted to move selfishly to talking. Okay, like you talked about the problem and kind of this innovation in Jamstack. Could you talk us through when someone says, okay, yeah, Scully's the thing I want to use. Like, what does that look like for them? How does it work? You were talking about pre-rendering and the problem of there's things you can pre-render at build time confidently, but then there's variations that make it untenable to build every variation of every page.
Yeah. So you just have to look at the pieces that are dynamic and the ones that are static, and just know, hey, my site's going to statically generate the static stuff, and the dynamic, I have to turn those on once the HTML is loaded and the JavaScript loads in the background. Then I can turn on those other pieces. Does that make sense? So like the cart would be kind of, for lack of a better term, it would be ngIf'd off during static generation, and then once the page loads and they can see your site, and then your JavaScript loads, you would ngIf the cart back again, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's kind of how you should think about it. The benefits are our users can see donuts, and they only have to load like a 25 kilobyte HTML page, and they can already see the page, versus everyone on this broadcast and everyone in the comments knows even the smallest Angular app, even when it's built for production, is significantly larger than 25 kilobytes, right? Like we all know that pre-gzipped, it's like at least half a meg with all the polyfills and everything that you're delivering to your users. True.
Yep.
And so in order to say, hey, on a mobile device on 4G, how fast could you download 25K versus half a meg? And it's going to be about 20 times. It's going to be significantly faster, but about 20 times faster. And so however long it takes you to do 25 kilobytes, it's going to take you 20 times longer to load the actual Angular app. Does that make sense? And so to try and serve mobile devices at a 20x performance loss is insanity. And so that's really where these concepts of Jamstack start to ring true, is because you can deliver so much more for just a few kilobytes of HTML.
Oh, Frosty, you got a spy behind you. It's like a BBC moment. Somebody's going to come have to drag him away.
Hey, don't do it. Come back later.
He should have brought it in his hands.
Yeah. Wes Grimes in the YouTube, he's talking about barbecue donuts.
Oh, let's not even give him the satisfaction.
Okay, sorry.
All right, so that's the concept.
Yeah.
So how does someone? What do they do to do this? Or if somebody's an Angular developer and they want to
a Scully?
the Scully way, like how's it different? What's their flow look like?
So like I have an app, I have a donut app already, and it's just not very performant. Is that what you're asking? And how do I?
I'm opening a donut shop. I'm making my choice on my tech stack. I'm like, oh yeah, I like Angular, but what's this interesting Scully thing?
Yeah.
What do they have to decide before they move forward, or what would their first step be in making a Scully?
So as an Angular developer, your first choice is really do we use Universal or do we use Scully? At this point, those are your only two options to get this kind of performance out of your app. And we could talk more about why you would make the decision to go Scully in a bit, if that's okay.
Yeah, I think it's worth saying like why you would. What's the difference between Universal and Scully? Like, what does Scully give you that, or how's your flow? Like, I imagine with Universal, you just have to do a lot more yourself, or figure a lot more about your pre-rendering strategies.
Let's come back to it because there's a lot of things to consider.
Let's come back to that. We'll table that.
Yeah, table the Angular versus the Scully versus Universal.
Yeah, so
let's not call it versus because
Yeah, we're all friends here.
Yeah, it's not a competition, but it's a choice. So that's why I'm phrasing it as a verse.
Yeah. So, quick question before we go there. You talked about Gatsby before and some of these other static site generators for other frameworks. Is Scully like Gatsby for Angular, or are you willing to make that connection? Or
so hold on. There's two questions. There's three questions outstanding. I'm going to go back and answer the first one, and then I'm going to come to Brandon's, and then we can maybe go to Jeff's.
All right, we're going to hold you to that because you're being like a politician here where you're just dodging.
No, I'm trying to make sure that we answer all the questions.
Okay.
The question was, how do I add it to my app?
I'm writing these down. Okay.
So we wrote a schematic where you just say ng add at Scully.io/init, and it kind of takes care of it for you right there. And if you have,
you've already got an Angular CLI workspace. Run that, and it'll Scullyify it.
Yeah, or if you have an NX
or
workspace,
an NX.
Yeah, it has support for NX
yes.
as well.
Thank you for the plug.
So, yeah.
NX.dev. Superior tool chain.
Yeah. So you can use it with NX.
By Scully.
Yeah, and we have a lot of clients because it's going to be most successful among companies who have bigger apps. So NX is going to be very common in our space because NX is used with big apps, right? And bigger clients.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
all the smart teams are using NX.
Yeah. So
wow, these are a lot of hot takes.
Yeah. So
that I agree with.
We're trying to hook it up. Anyway, so yeah, and you just run the schematic and it drops it in, and you're really kind of cooking with gas at that point, and you can already kind of just start going with Scully, and there's not a lot more you have to do. So if you want to add blog support, so you can add a blog to your app, we have a schematic to add a blog. If you want to create a plugin to kind of start extending Scully's builder, we have a schematic to kind of start your plugin stuff. So we've tried to build some schematics to make things easier for developers, just to make this setup, just kind of that kind of schematic love that you've kind of come to know and love from the Angular CLI. So that's how you get started. It's very simple.
Are there any like prerequisites? Like you have to be using the Angular router? Is that a thing?
So you don't have to be using the Angular router, but if you don't use the Angular router, so Brandon, are you pretending there's another router?
No, I'm not. I'm genuinely asking the question.
Okay, so if your app
Brandon's
has
working
to have
on a router though. He's setting it up for when he releases Brandon Router 1.0.
So here's the great thing is our app actually doesn't care what router you're using. And we can get into why this is so much more powerful than a Gatsby or an Angular Universal later, but it doesn't care at all what router you're using. Like we right now, we were implementing at a client where probably 80% of their routes are AngularJS. The router controls those. And the other 20% are Angular routes. And so we've got it running with them, and it doesn't really care who's in charge of the route. It just needs to know what are the routes, and then I will render them and save them out to HTML. So that's really the big thing that it cares about. So the next question was, is this Gatsby? That's Brandon's question, right? So I answered the first question. The second question, is this Gatsby? Yeah. Gatsby for React is a lot like, in my opinion, Angular Universal for Angular. It has plugins that allows you to do a lot of stuff, but it's also like Scully because you don't actually have to ship Gatsby production. Like you don't have to ship a node server to production in order to do Gatsby. Gatsby can be all generated at build time. So in that way, Gatsby is a lot like Scully, but in the fact that it's running in Node, so you have to be very, very strict, plus very, very lucky that none of your third-party libs are not being strict. Like that's one of the big limitations around Gatsby is your third-party libraries have to be crazy, like Node compliant. If they ever talk to the document or the window stuff, your app starts to break. And same with Universal. If you try and use a third-party lib that breaks this out, things start to break down. And so you can't really add Gatsby to an existing React project. You can't really add Angular Universal to an existing Angular project. It's a very hard thing to do, to kind of jam these existing projects into those folders.
No pun intended.
Yeah, that's not the Jamstack thing, though.
I see what you did there.
Kind of force it in there. But with Scully doesn't really care about any of those things, because Scully's not rendering a node, it's rendering a Puppeteer. And that's really kind of the strength of Scully, is if it can render for your user, it can render for Scully. So and that's the strength there. So it's rendering inside of Puppeteer, which allows us to not care about so many things that Gatsby would prevent you from doing, or that Universal would prevent you from doing.
That's interesting. I didn't know that. But yeah, when I was on the Angular team back in the day, and we were helping with Universal and working on making an official thing, we had experimented, or I personally had experimented with rendering via WebDriver and Protractor pages, and it actually was pretty fast and pretty good. But one of the challenges was we had to constrain things that would be like some things, like Angular itself actually would be modifying style sheets. Some scripts would be adding more inline scripts, like analytic scripts and things like that. Or there would be certain things that would manipulate the DOM in a way that you didn't want to be pre-rendered, or like, for example, if you were doing preloading of style sheets using something like Critical CSS as an optimization, then there would be a script that once that style sheet is loaded, it changes the style sheet from preload to being rel equals style sheet. So like there are just kind of little surprising behaviors like that that we had to work around. Do you see, like, so when people are doing their apps, do you have to work around things like that, or do you impose certain constraints to keep the DOM kind of in the state you would expect it to be pre-rendered?
So here's the beautiful thing about doing Puppeteer. It's fantastic, is we don't care. Like, we're not Angular Universal. We don't care. We're not running in nodes, so we don't have to care about. So there's kind of a tagline we throw out there. It's just Angular. So when someone's like, how do I fetch data with my app at Scully? How do you do it in Angular? You just use the HTTP client or some WebSocket client or however, Apollo, however you're getting data, it's just Angular. You do that. And then when your data is done, we watch the ng zone, and when the zone says, hey, there's no more things happening on this page, this page is basically settled, we save it out, and then you're pre-rendered, and then we move on to the next view.
I don't think you really answered my question though about like Critical CSS is one of the specific things that we had that so it puts a link rel preload in the page, and then the JavaScript library waits until that thing is loaded, and then we'll change it to link rel style sheet. That's what Critical does. And so what the problem we ran into was the version of the page we were capturing is the post-loaded style sheet, where it's already changed that thing to a link rel style sheet with an href pointing to something.
Yep.
And which wasn't what we wanted in the pre-rendered page. We wanted the preload to be. Is there anything that accounts for that in Scully, or lets you, like, does it have the concept of phases or anything that you can work around those kinds of things that might be changing the DOM in ways that you don't want them to be changed for the pre-rendered page?
We have plugins, and you can actually reverse those things or even prevent them from happening. But that needs a kind of plugin that we are not exposing yet, and I'm not sure we are going to expose that short term.
Okay. Yeah, and it's something that could be coded around. It was just that was just one of the things when we were researching it that we decided was something would require more engineering effort than just pointing at it. Puppeteer it's running in Chromium, right? So it will basically just be a page that loads.
We can basically interact with the page that is in Puppeteer.
Yeah,
and make it do things.
One of the pushbacks we got when we proposed doing this kind of rendering was the performance of it, which we actually found was pretty good. But there were limits to it. Is there? Do you have ideas in terms of benchmarks or like a limit of pages you would want to pre-render?
There's strategies around this stuff. So currently, we have several sample apps that we develop against to make sure we're hitting all of our edge cases. And we can process 100 pages. Is it 100 pages in our sample app standard? But it's like 140, right?
Yeah, 120 something.
Yeah, and that takes about 20 seconds. Okay, and then we have another app that we do about 1,500 routes, and that takes about 60 seconds. Okay, so most of the build time is the first. Like there's about 20 seconds up front that you can't get past, and that's kind of set in there. It's at least going to take 20 seconds, but then after that, it starts to scale up depending on how many pages you have, and it's pretty quick, to be honest. Like it's very, very fast.
It utilizes your full processors. If it takes all cores on your system, and renders up basically a puppeteer core.
Yeah, it makes a processor pool, a puppeteer pool, based on how many cores are on your machine, and then it renders as fast as it can across that pool of processors, of puppeteer processes. So
cool.
Yeah. So we had someone ask that exact question in the comments. So I'm glad we got to talk about that. It is very quick, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah, and I think one thing we've seen with folks, if you have like 1 million pages, there can be things where you could I'm sure they could use Scully to pre-render some templatized version of the page that then could be populated with other markup after the fact, right?
Yeah, and then also though, we have features in there so that you can say, hey, the JavaScript hasn't changed. And if the JavaScript hasn't changed, like just the content has, so you only want to pre-render based on content changes, not on code changes. Mm-hmm. So let's say you only want to render just the donut pages. You don't want to render all the
Boston
about
cream
pages. Yeah, just the Boston cream page. No, that's a good example.
Yeah, we have the Valentine's version of Boston cream now, where it's in a heart-shaped chocolate which Duncan did this weekend for my kids. So
you could pass it a filter, and it will only render routes that match that filter. Okay, and so you can generate a subsection of your site. Now, anytime your Angular code changes, you have to regenerate everything.
So you're saying if I do a content change, I don't have to do a new Angular build, and I don't have to re-render everything. It can just re-render and and it will do an incremental deploy. Or do you do anything with deployment, or is that up to the?
No, yeah. And so you were asking before we started, hey, is there any sort of additional services that the Scully team and Hero Devs team is going to provide?
Hey, I was supposed to ask that.
Well,
you are totally monopolizing. I'm the host here. Hey, let me ask you. This all sounds great, but what's the catch? Is this going to be a business for you? Do you have plans for any kind of add-ons or things like that? Are you going to restrict the open source version so you can hook people and then force them to pay for things that they need?
No, Scully's going to be open source for forever. And but everyone who uses Scully, and the bigger you get, they're going to all have to solve the same problems, which is how do I generate just some pieces and then deploy those? So Scully will have some SaaS offerings where we can take care of rebuilding on content only changes, and you can take care of rebuilding on code changes. Does that make sense? And so we'll have ways for we'll have add-ons that bigger companies that have to solve these problems again and again and again can solve them very easily. So those will be some of the add-ons. And then the other catch, if you will, is a lot like how Nrwl is with NX. We put it out there to provide a quality product that helps people, and our hope is that when they need consulting around that, they'll call us. So that's the other piece that helps Hero Devs is when you want to implement this. If you have any questions, you can call Hero Devs to help out. So yeah.
I would definitely say that's a good idea. It's worked well for us as well. That teams who are at X, we try to make as high quality that anyone can use it. Once you want to do something really interesting with it, you want to do something where you're making a drastic change, then it's a good idea to talk to us to make sure we kind of help you get started on the right foot, avoid some pitfalls, figure out best practices. I definitely see the same with Scully, like figuring out the infrastructure to support it, figuring out how to optimize it for your team's own workflow and your content teams versus your dev teams and releases and that kind of stuff. Definitely would see that being a nice business.
Yeah.
What are
performance?
We talked about a couple of things. Yeah, performance. A couple of things like blogs, a donut shop. Are there what are the particular use cases you think makes sense for this? E-commerce in general, or do you think is?
Yeah, the big limiting factor I would say is there's kind of two main focuses. Are you behind a login? So can your app be crawled by Google? Basically is what I'm asking. So if your app is behind a login, it becomes less important to do these
Which you mean like is there significant stuff in front of the login? Because all apps can have some, like even an e-commerce site, it's like
True.
part of it is log, like your checkout is.
But some apps live entirely behind a login screen. Like,
like
the
my
only
bank.
thing that's public is the login, right?
Mhm.
Exactly. Like a bank has some pages that are public for marketing, but
My bank pre-renders my account details, and anyone can see it on Google actually. So
and you get push alerts. We've pre-rendered your data.
you can see when I overdraft. Yeah.
Yeah, sure, cool. Yeah, so if you're largely behind a login, it becomes less important, but potentially still important if the answer to your next question is true, which is, are most of your users on mobile web? If that's yes, then the pre-rendering becomes like so important for you. The more mobile web users you have, the more important it comes to implement something like Scully. And Scully starts to serve you in a way that Universal never could in those scenarios. And so that's really, really important.
And are you in your case when you render the page, is Angular bootstrapping in the background once the page has been loaded and rendered?
Yeah. So it's the same as it loads today, except for instead of having an empty index HTML, you've got a ton of stuff in the body. The whole app is pre-rendered in the body. And then at the bottom of the body is the same thing that's currently in the bottom of the index, which is the reference to your Angular JavaScript files, right? Your built JavaScript. And so then after you see the page, then that JavaScript starts to load. And once it's downloaded, your Angular stuff will bootstrap on top of it. And so then your app turns into an Angular app.
Cool. So does this eliminate you having to use like no script tags, or does it take those out for pre-rendered pages, or?
I didn't understand your question.
We're losing. Frosty's getting a little bit choppy. Fix your internet.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, tell your kids to stop watching YouTube.
The question was, does it handle like no script tags? If you have that in your HTML, does it take care of that so that you don't get like the pre-rendered page and then like the no script thing like that at the bottom? Or
I don't know what a no script tag is. Sorry. I'm stupid.
We don't take that thing in consideration now because, frankly, I have not seen that used in production that much. If it's a problem, we can just filter it out with a simple plugin.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's because I've seen, like, I guess this maybe I'm dating myself, but those no script tags in there, and it tells you this page requires JavaScript, those kind of things. So I'm just wondering, if you're using Scully,
would Scully, would it work without Java? Like, so Opera Mini is still a use case for some apps. Would this work? Like, would A tags just link to a different pre-rendered page before?
Yeah.
Yes, that will work fully.
So let's say you did cool animations with CSS, and you wanted to, and everything was just an A tag largely, right? So we have one of the community members built a plugin that anyone can use now. It's out on NPM. And it will remove the JavaScript tags from all your pre-rendered pages. And so what that does is people are now just using a static website, right? The same as if it was generated with like WordPress or Jekyll. There's no JavaScript in there.
It's a bit more subtle. It removes the Angular script tags. So you can inject some script, but remove the bulk of Angular.
Yeah. So that's that's some of the stuff you can do, and why you would build a plugin is like, hey, I want even more performance. Take Angular out, because once it's pre-generated, I don't need Angular anymore. So, does that make sense?
Yeah, I got you there.
Yeah. So yeah, that's we do support that story.
Yeah, if you have a documentation site or a simple blog site, you often don't need Angular there to be.
Yeah.
And taking it out is a real option.
Yeah.
And it's just HTML and CSS, and it is blazingly fast.
Yeah. So when I've played around with Scully some, and I was testing it out with the NGRX docs, and just wondering how like I said, it didn't click for me at first as far as how to like generate things. But one thing I was interested in with and I mentioned this to Sandra, was about like API docs, the plugins you mentioned before. How does that work with like where you can extend it? Could I like read my source code and generate like my API docs using Scully? Would that be
totally? Yeah,
that is totally possible. Yes.
Yeah. So there's 2 types of plugins right now that you'll build for Scully. The first one helps Scully. So there's 2 steps to Scully. The first one is it has to find all the routes in your app. And then the second one is it has to generate all the pages. So we have a plugin system where you can help it find all the routes, and then we have another plugin system where you can help it render everything. And so those 2 steps have plugins to them. And so an example of how you help it is in our donut app. Imagine we have app, so we have localhost /donuts/ maple bar / Boston cream, right? So we have all those different donut IDs that are going to go into the route, right? So in your Angular route, you'd have this :donut ID. You know what I'm saying? And so Scully's going to find that and go, hey, I don't know the IDs that go there. So I need you
Is that how it talks, like the Fonz?
Hey, man. Yeah, it's
we
kind
had a
of
tremendous time on the voiceovers there. Yeah.
Hey, man, where do I get these donut IDs from? It's a bit of like a New York Italian thing going on. And so and so you're like, oi, here you go. And you teach it how to get the donut IDs. And so that would be like that's kind of the route plugins, is how you teach how to get the IDs that are in your Angular routes. Because sometimes IDs exist on disk, sometimes they exist in a WordPress, sometimes they exist in some Postgres or some GraphQL or some Firebase somewhere. So it doesn't really matter where those are at. They're very easy to build the plugins to get those. And then once your page is fully rendered, so imagine you have a blog or some docs like Brandon's saying, and you want to take those out of maybe Git, or you want to take them off of the hard drive, or you want to take them out of somewhere and turn them from markdown into markup. So Scully can take care of that for you, and it makes it really, really easy through that plugin system.
That's cool. Yeah, I think there are things like landing pages or things like that you couldn't even crawl to find from starting at the index or something like that. So something where you can plug is definitely a necessary thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can also just provide an array with routes you want to crawl that are not even able to being found automatically.
Yeah, so imagine that you have a React app and you want to use Scully for it because Gatsby is too hard. You can't turn your React app into a Gatsby app. That would be too tough to rewrite into a Gatsby app.
Shots fired.
So are you saying there's competition there that you want to just reach into the React Gatsby space?
Yeah. So, well, I mean, we're going to reach into the Gatsby space, but you have to realize Gatsby is serving not most of the React community, because most of the React apps in the React world are not Gatsby, they're React, and Gatsby can't really service them, and that is a shot fired. Yeah, because when you're writing Gatsby, you're writing Gatsby. The same way when you're writing Universal, you're not writing just Angular, you're writing a very specific Angular, right? But Scully doesn't care. Scully's like, I don't render in Node, so I don't care. I don't have all these limitations that Gatsby or Universal are putting around me. So you can say, hey, Scully, here's all my React routes. Do that. And it will be like, all right. And it will go and it will start to render your React stuff. And right now we're working with one of the Vue vixens to get a Vue app going. And I certainly wouldn't say we have first-class Vue and React support yet, because we're focused on Angular. Once we go beta, we'll start focusing on the React alpha and the Vue alpha, because rendering this with Puppeteer is so much more powerful than anything that's really out there. This will change the game for most apps, because most apps, unless you started writing it with Node or like this isomorphic story in mind, it's just not going to work. And so Scully removes that massive limitation.
Is it have you helped anyone take an existing app that's not being pre-rendered and move it to Scully?
So we have a giant customer that we're almost done on, and it's been good to work with. It's a company that has insane conversion rates on their traffic, and
Insanely good or bad?
like 3 times as good as industry best. Like it's insane. Like 6% of their traffic converts to
Is
money.
it Google?
No,
Google converts how many people to actually committing a search?
100% to search, but I don't really know. These guys are insane though. And so, yeah, we're working with them to get this implemented and deployed. The simpler the app, the easier it is to implement. The larger the app, the harder it is to implement, because you want to take advantage of like the data caching so that you don't have like a flash of data. Like what you don't want is the pre-rendered version appears, and then Angular loads, and Angular removes everything, calls the APIs, which takes 200 milliseconds. And once that answer comes back, it then repaints it back up. You know what I'm saying? So you don't want that flash. So we have steps where you can get rid of that flash, but you have to add those in. But we're giving you the tools to make it work. So,
Cool.
yeah.
So what kind of, you said it kind of gets more tricky as the larger the app is. Can you talk about what kind of things what kind of problems you had to solve with those that kind of fed back into the project?
Yeah, so a couple things that with this giant customer that we've added that will make it easier for everyone else to use is they have some so Scully depends on this tool called guest parser. And anyone who knows Minko's really smart, and he built this guest parser that's capable of walking through your Angular app and saying, "Hello, I see your routes." And like
That is Minko to a T.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
I
And
didn't know Minko sounded like that.
yeah, it does.
I've been
Yeah, most people just see him on Twitter. They've never actually heard him speak.
Yeah, you got to have a couple drinks with him, and
Then it comes out.
April Fool's Day, the St. Patrick's Day, like it's crazy. And so guest sometimes will have some errors though, okay, because guest isn't prepared for all Angular apps, and so we need to allow any of our customers to get past, or any of our users to get past those errors. And so we've had to add exceptions, like say, hey, leave this directory alone because it doesn't work with that directory. Like maybe that directory is full of AngularJS or jQuery plugins or something that are causing guests to freak out. And so we had to add some exceptions in for that. We've had to add in exceptions for the AngularJS pieces so they can play well in a hybrid scenario. And those changes are largely what have enabled us to support a React or a Vue app as well, because once you support one thing that's not Angular, we realized, man, we can support anything that's not Angular anymore. And so we had to add a lot of those things in there to kind of get this thing bootstrapped and off the ground. So working on one giant app added a whole ton of features that now other companies can start to enjoy. So yeah, those are some of the things, but largely the thing I already said, Brandon, which is getting rid of that flash, is kind of the big deal. Like you're going to spend a lot of time making sure that flash doesn't happen.
And don't spend your time. Just hire hero devs to solve it for you. They figured it out.
I mean, you know your app better than we do, but together we can just say, we can console with you and say, hey,
Exactly.
do thing A and thing B, and you'll be good to go. And then your team can
You're
take care
just
of it.
using all of our spiel from Nrwl. That's the same thing. You know your space. We know the stack. Let's work together.
Let's work together. Yeah. And so that's kind of the goal there, is to just let us lightly consult in there with you. But also, if you're in the scenario where like, nah, we need you to do it, then cool. That we can do that too.
For free.
For almost
free, yeah.
free.
Almost free.
You say for a fee?
Yeah, for a fee.
Yeah, for a fee.
free
Free fee.
free.
Yeah.
We've got about 15 minutes left, and we do have some questions from the audience.
Okay.
One last selfish question is, how does it work with Angular CLI? But more importantly, NX. Can people using NX take advantage of this? What's that look like? Do you have schematics builders that are compatible with NX?
Yeah, so the schematic knows if you're in an Angular workspace or an NX workspace. We actually attribute to open source. We had someone pull request in the support for NX, and
All right.
now
I'll figure out who that is and I'll give him a shout out.
Yeah.
When I said M, I didn't mean him. I meant give them a shout out.
give them a shout
I
out.
don't know who did it.
And we had someone pull request and support to run it inside of Docker. And we've had a lot of community help, and so yeah, we definitely support running in Angular CLI. We support running in an NX workspace. We support either of those inside of a Docker container, or not in a Docker container. Like we're getting some good contributions from the community around these things.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
So yeah.
All right, so it does work. Then
Yes.
I can endorse it then, because I can't endorse anything that doesn't play well with NX legally.
Right.
Like the company has I don't get paid if I endorse something that's incompatible.
All right.
All right, let's get to some of these hard-hitting audience questions.
Do it.
Okay, Wes asked something about barbecue. I'm not even going to delete. Yeah, cross through that.
If the question doesn't have barbecue and grill in it, you can just skip over it.
Mm-hmm. And Adam Barrett said that personally the off-topic tangents are his favorite parts. So thank you for that, Adam. My favorite part too.
We appreciate you. We appreciate you.
I mean, it's the cost. These are free broadcasts. The cost is you have to let us have a little bit of fun with it.
Yeah, we're getting paid in words, so you know.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get to some real questions here. By the way, in the YouTube comments, there's the link for the book. You can also the URL is pretty simple. If you go to netlify.com/O'Reilly-Jamstack, no other spaces there. So netlify.com/O'Reilly-Jamstack will be the Jamstack book. There's also an https:/// www. before that, but I assume you
We
know
expected you to know that.
that. Yeah. If you don't know that, then that's fine. Okay. Some people have had issues getting it working. Maybe those were like somebody tried it with ng add. I don't have any more info than that from the question. Are these things that have stabilized more? I assume maybe that was when it was first released, and there's been a lot of bug fixes.
Yeah, so we went into alpha at the beginning of December, and because we were more excited than anyone, right? It's kind of like winning a Golden Globe. Like no one cares about that as much as you do, and we were super excited, and so we were like, we got to alpha this thing stat, and there was a lot of issues, and
It was Aaron. We were all going, we should do a closed alpha. And Aaron, no.
No point. And so we fixed a lot of issues since then. We release multiple times a day. We're on version 70 right now, 0.0.70, and so we're about to go beta. Right? I think we're kind of having the conversation to say, hey, I think we're ready for beta, and so that's where we're at right now. It has stabilized, but there are still questions, and so we've tried to provide a couple things to make it real easy for people. One, we got tags added to Stack Overflow, so you can ask your question on Stack Overflow and get community help. The second thing is we have a Gitter channel, so anyone can just join and start asking questions, and either our team or the other community members that are using it that know it will answer your questions live. And then we also host a weekly office hours at noon Mountain Standard, so at 11 a.m. PST, where you can get in with the whole team and you can ask any question you want, and you've got us for an hour. Where we're just there. It's all about your questions. And so we also have that live office hours as well.
That's really cool. We need to steal that idea, Brandon. What do you think?
Yes, I think that's great.
The second I implemented that, I was like, I promise open source everywhere is going to start to to this.
Yeah, you're
I thought you were going to say you're like filled with regret. The minute
No. It's great. It's great. People say, hey, we've had tweets where it's like, these guys care. That office hours shows a real dedication to their product. And so, I think you should do it. But so we've tried to make it easy for anyone to get over any of the learning hurdles. So,
Is that structured, or is it just community office hours where anyone, it's a group thing where everyone is on the same channel and just ask questions?
No, it's just go on a channel and do some
So it's a Google
shopping,
Meet.
whatever.
Cool.
Yeah, so it's a Google Meet. This week, Facundo, who he's actually on YouTube right now, Facundo got on, and we were just like, no one asked any questions. So we just sat there and we looked for ugly sweaters the whole time. And
that's like most of my one-on-ones at Nrwl. I end up going either to IMDb or Amazon looking for some product. Anyway,
I can't even remember what website we were on, but we found some like cool stuff and then like some horrible stuff. And so it's like,
I should have worn my ugly Nrwl sweater today.
Yeah.
One person asked, can you get your blog data or whatever content data from external sources like Firebase, things other than Markdown?
Totally.
Yes.
Yeah,
so,
We have multiple examples. So if you
I
just
mean, you said that it's just an Angular app, so it assumed that that it is whatever you get your data
Markdown
from.
is a different question though. Like so data, yeah, it's just Angular. You just get it from Angular. However you'd get it in Angular, that's it. But for like your content, does my content have to be in a Markdown file? No. Your content can be you could use FlameLink. FlameLink is a CMS on top of Firebase. So you could use FlameLink and you could fetch the content from FlameLink, pull it in through a plugin and put it onto the page, and then you're good. You could use Contentful, WordPress. The data could be somewhere else.
And me not knowing the details of the pre-rendering process, does that happen before Puppeteer does the rendering of the page, or like is that a pre-processing step before then, or is that something they would have done in the browser?
No, so how it works is Puppeteer would render the page, and then the page would have like just this empty component there, and then your plugin, then you'd write a plugin that would say, hey, take that empty spot where the content goes, go get the data from FlameLink or from, wherever you've got the content. Maybe it's in a Markdown file, maybe it's remote. Go get it wherever it is, get it and put it in this HTML page right there. And then that's what you save to file, and that's the pre-rendered page. So that's kind of the renderer plugin.
Yeah. What we do if you do that, we will add the Angular content things. So your scoped CSS will be working in those pages too.
Yeah. Yes. And on top of that, and that was a new feature that Sandra added this week. So I want
Sandra, the tech lead of the project.
Sandra, the architect. Yep. And so
you heard it here first.
Yeah.
So as a post renderer plugin that builds that stuff, you basically just get the indexed HTML as a string. So you can use something like JS DOM to get jQuery like syntax to kind of manipulate it. So even though that is running in Node, you can use JS DOM to make it very easy to manipulate that indexed HTML and put your content in it wherever you need it. Does that make sense? So yeah, that's one thing that makes it very easy to work with. So yeah.
Another question, Kyle Cords from Oasis Digital asked on Twitter, like, is this, so he had asked like why use this third-party add-on versus universal, and I think we've talked about a lot of the difference in it, but it brings up the question, like, is this something that is it semi-official, Angular endorsed, supported?
Yeah,
I mean, they've partnered with you and helped with it, but
yeah, it's pretty. I mean, like when in talking with the Angular team, like, hey, what do you think what we should talk about at NGConf this year? The Angular team's like, definitely talk about Scully, because Scully's kind of the hot new thing that's going to take over the Angular community. And I totally agree. I think Scully's going to be a massive movement. Once Angular developers learn what it is, it will start to be as important as Gatsby is for React developers. Yeah. Once React developers understood the performance implications, they're like, hey, we're doing it this way. And the Angular community just doesn't know what they don't know. And I know because I was in that scenario. Once you see it, it's like, oh, dude, we got to do this thing. So yeah, we definitely. So Scully's gonna take off. If we could take a few seconds to do a compare between Universal and Scully, I would appreciate that, because that's the number one question people ask us. No, we got to move on.
Well, I mean, we'll let the lead architect decide, but
I will. Frosty.
I'll add one thing to that, is that in my talking with folks on the Angular team over the past several years, because us doing NX, we wanted it to be a thing that is complementary to what they're doing on the team and not competitive to it. So we've always tried to find ways that we're aligning with their goals. And I think this hasn't changed. Their goals have always been, they want to work on the core things that make sense to be part of the core platform and that add a lot of value by being part of the core Angular story, and then enable people like hero devs, like Nrwl, and other individuals in the community to build interesting things with those, and to have a relationship with those people, to support them, make sure that we don't break each other, don't fragment the community and that kind of thing. But they don't, like, there even things like NGRX, like there's always been talk of, should we move this into the core of Angular, and it's such a first class, like it's almost like an official state management, and well, it's not just state management, as Brandon would say, but
it's just state management.
Yeah, just the store.
Just state management today. I'll send you a check in the mail later. Thanks.
Yeah, but but it's like those things make sense as being managed by the community. They can innovate in more interesting ways. The Angular team can then focus more on the primitives, the core bits that make Angular what it is. And so I'd say, even though I would hope this never becomes an official part of Angular, because it's better to be outside the team.
Yeah, when we kind of kicked it off, the intention from Google was, hey, we want this to be open source. We want it to be community ridden. We want hero devs to run with it and make sure it grows. Mm-hmm. And that's why they were like, we can't partner with anyone on this. We have to partner with people we trust, which is why it was great to get that endorsement from them and say, hey, we trust hero devs. So it is going to be independent, just like NX or NGRX, probably, forever. So I would count on that.
Cool. And let's see, we've got one about, do they work with the Nrwl and NX workspace? Yes, they do.
Yep.
Thanks to the contributor. We need to find out who that is. I would like to say who it is on here, but
so on YouTube, someone said, "Does Scully make Angular universal obsolete?" I need to talk about this.
Sorry, talk about it.
Jeff said, "Don't talk
about
it."
Okay, go ahead.
I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it.
Well, we've only got 4 minutes left. If you monopolize this whole time, if you make us run over, then you're banned.
I'm gonna go 120 seconds.
Okay.
I'll give it back after 120. So, with Universal, you have to have your code running in a very specific state. It's very difficult to maintain. It's very difficult to shoehorn into an existing project. Most people abandon Universal because it gets very, very difficult. Second, Universal, you have to ship a node or a node server to production, or a whole series of node servers, depending on your traffic, because you're going to pre-render every page, and that's brutal. So you have to now support this.
Not necessarily true. I mean, you can pre-render with Universal. We do it with several.
You can use a pre-render. True. That's true. You can use the pre-renderer, right? But you still have the first limitation from the first one. If you're using Universal in like the live sense of it, though, where you're
the standard way, the default way is most people are doing it at runtime.
Yeah. So if you're server side rendering, you also you lose the benefit of CDNs. So instead of someone being able to grab your content from a CDN, they have to come all the way to wherever your server is, which is gonna inherently delay the loading time of the app. And so there's a lot of those benefits just go you just get out of the box with Scully. Like a lot of that just comes out of it, gets out of the way. So you do gain the ability to pre-render or server-side render dynamic content with Universal, which is something Scully has no concept of. Runtime dynamic content. So there is that advantage. So if you need server-side rendered dynamic content, then Universal's your only option. If you don't need that, then you're good. Anyway,
there are very few use cases that do need that, and like out of all the people we've talked to, it's almost always there's only one part of the page that needs to be done dynamically, and you can almost always just put a placeholder there and get 99% of the value.
But as far as what does Universal do that Scully, besides the dynamic rendering, Scully aims to do everything better than what Universal can do, because it's just Angular. It's not Angular Universal. It's just Angular. It's a very, very simple version of Angular.
All right, there you go. Well, I think that's our time. I want to say thank you to Brandon and Frosty and Xander for joining us. Any final parting words? How should people get started? Where should they go?
I just go to Scully.io. It'll take you to, right now it goes to our GitHub, but pretty soon we'll have the official doc set up. Just go to Scully.io, and there's a getting started guide there. And there's also the full documentation there as well. So
and does it have a link to the office hours and Gitter and all that there?
Yeah, it's got links to right on Scully.io. It talks about, hey, this is how you get a hold of us.
Yeah, so, from me talking with you before you launched this and everything, it's exciting to see this kind of being your first big open source thing as a company. It's exciting to see it taking off and solving real problems for folks and the community really latching onto it. So congratulations on that. Thank you for what you're doing. Brandon, if I want to give Sandra the last word as the lead architect on the project, but Brandon, any parting words before we sign off?
I just
barbecue
want to
or
second what you said. Barbecue on the grill. What else? I got to plug NGRX because that's what we're doing. Check out the website, conference in November. I think that's it. NX.dev. We do docs. We're helping out there. If you have issues getting set up, we help you there. So
yeah, you and the other folks working on the docs have been making a ton of improvements on NX.dev. We're really anytime I hear something and I ping Brandon or somebody and say, hey, somebody's trying to figure this out. It's usually like the next day the docs have been updated with something. So tweet at us and get in touch with us if there are things you're trying to use NX and you're having issues or whatever, and we'll do our best to. Brandon will do his best to make it clear.
Hey, I can't. No. I can't take credit for all that. The team of people that I work with are excellent. So
yeah, we'll tweet at Brandon so he can route it. All right, Sander, you can have the last word as the lead architect of Scully.
I would say keep static and use Scully.
Keep static and use Scully.
Oh,
nice
is that the tagline? I like it.
The truth is out there. Come use Scully and find it.
All right. And Frosty will personally look at Twitter and answer all the unanswered questions and the YouTube comments. Thank you, everyone, for participating, for joining in and asking questions. And thank you to our guests again. And we'll see you next time.
See ya.
Bye.
See you.